When people think of Adolf Hitler, the first thing that comes to mind is usually of the poorly mustachioed dictator that ruined most of Europe and a lot of the rest of the world. But what the vast majority of people overlook is the fact that he almost single-handedly pulled Germany out of the worst economic and political depression that the nation had ever experienced. The nation had been beaten down during World War I, and Europe was basically forcing them to pay the entire cost of the war. Then along came the Great Depression, and that reduced the effectiveness of the nation's economy to an even greater degree. When Adolf Hitler assumed power over the nation, he was handed the reins to a nation torn apart by depression, with incompetent political leadership and a questionable future. He managed to not only lift it out of its slump, but turn it into a military superpower that almost steamrolled Europe, the Allies, and the world. No matter who you ask, it takes an exceptional individual to do that. So where did he go wrong? Where did he stop being an economic and political genius and start being a genocidal madman? Well, his political career began in the early 1920s when he was invited to join the German Workers' Party. Hitler had been a decorated member of the German army during World War I and had actually been asked to scout out the German Workers' Party. Instead of succeeding in his mission, he impressed the leader of the Workers' Party with his oratory skills and joined it, leading him down the path of occult societies and what he eventually called anti-Jewish socialism. He began to speak out and eventually led a march against what he saw as a corrupt Bavarian government. That march resulted in his imprisonment, which perhaps led to the most important stage in his development from patriotic soldier of his country to obsessed psychopath, the writing of his book. Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, was penned mostly during his stay in that jail. It is partially his autobiography and partially an exposition of his philosophy. It's filled with racism and profiling, with Hitler spending a significant portion of it explaining how Jews are the source of most of the world's problems. He sold several 100,000 copies before gaining public office and several million afterwards. The popularity of the book during the war played a major role in accustoming the German population to anti-Semitic ideals and causing them to condone the atrocious treatment of Jews that continued during the war. Hitler grew in power significantly over the next few years. He transformed the old German Workers' Party into the Nazis and proceeded to gain a significant following in the nation. He entered the 1932 presidential elections but failed to win. He still garnered 35% of the votes, however, establishing him as a force in German politics. Afterwards, the economic climate played directly into his advantage. The German people were fed up with their moderate government and its inability to pull the nation out of the depression it went into during the first half of the 1930s. As people tended to move more and more to the extremes of politics, Hitler fine-tuned his radical approach to accommodate for more and more Germans losing faith in their conservative government. Eventually, he rode this wave of success to be appointed Chancellor of Germany and, by 1933, officially outlawed all political parties besides his Nazis. Ultimately, his racism was made evident to the world during the 1936 Olympics, during which Hitler famously refused to watch African-American athlete Jesse Owens compete. He walked out of the stadium rather than watch him win. The kind of charged environment that the Dodd family was tossed into for the first few years of their stay in Germany. As diplomatic ambassadors, they were granted a certain degree of insulation from the worst atrocities that occurred, but even they could tell there was more to the political scene than just the peaceful operations of a one-party system. In this case, what the Dodd family best symbolizes is the exact point where Hitler messed up: his foreign policy. If Hitler had sat in his own borders and left everyone else well enough alone, he would probably have wound up being lauded as one of the greatest political geniuses of all time. He would never have had access to the 6 million Jews whose deaths really made him the archetypical antagonist. He would have united a previously disunited nation under his banner and lifted them from economic woe to worldwide significance. All these are the hallmarks of a great leader. Hitler erred in that he chose to let his personal racial prejudices dictate his political actions and plans. Without those, he may have been one of the greatest leaders ever. With them, he is, and likely will be, for a while, the ultimate villain.